Joining me now is Nationals leader David Littleproud. David, what's your assessment of all of this? I mean, how much relief will this actually provide to households in the short term?
Well, that's the problem. There's too many unknowns, and it sounds as though that the government is going to pick winners here rather than broad household support where all households are feeling this pain. So there's a lot of motherhood statements, but if you go to the structural piece of what they're trying to achieve here, apart from the rebates, I fail to see how they're going to be able to provide any relief at all. Now, if you look at coal and capping that at $125 a tonne, most of the coal mines that are attached to the actual coal-fired power stations have contracts of around anywhere from $30 up to probably $60 to $90. So they're already under $100 anyway. With respect to gas, and this is where the government has dithered and delayed with respect to increasing supply, where you can really increase supply quicker. They've wasted 6 months where there was gas projects that could have been brought onto line for domestic supply, but because Chris Bowen has a philosophical hate for gas, they haven't moved on this. And the reality is, if you start putting a price cap on it, you start actually tearing away at the fundamentals of increasing supply. Who would go and drill more holes if you're going to have a price cap put on you? And in fact, which makes it unattractive in many ways for them to continue to develop. This is a structural challenge that the government has wasted, and I see the only way that they're going to be able to help households is through this direct rebate, and we're not against direct rebates in the short term, but their policy settings aren't going to go to the structural needs of increasing supply. This is a supply issue, one in which Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese are directly responsible for, because they have an ideology that doesn't back up the practical reality of people's energy bills, because they are recklessly moving down a renewable energy path without making sure that our firming energy, our gas and our coal, and potentially even small-scale modular nuclear is being considered and giving the investment signals to be bought online. And this is why you're paying the bill, is because indecision and the dithering of an ideology that doesn't back up the practical reality of energy bills that Australian households and businesses are paying.
Well, and that's basically what I said at the top of the show. I mean, it's all been so ideologically driven to the point where we can't even have a genuine discussion about nuclear power. I said earlier, if it's not economically viable, no one will build it. So there's nothing to lose in lifting the ban. But as for these price caps, I mean, it's basically government interference in the market. And we saw some government interference in the market earlier in the year when prices were going through the roof, and that was sort of an immediate thing. And from what I understand, the power providers are entitled to be compensated for the caps that were put on them at that time. Now, that compensation has to be paid by someone. Presumably, that cost ultimately flows through to the consumer. So does the consumer actually end up any better off? Or are we just delaying the inevitable, which is someone has to be paid for the price of producing that energy?
Exactly, Caleb. There's an old adage in life that my old man taught me, is that ultimately someone always has to pay. And ultimately, that's you, the Australian taxpayer, the consumer. So this will be coming back to my first point about the government picking winners. And in Anthony Albanese's press conference, he talked about those that are most disadvantaged. That will get the relief, will get the rebates. But there's plenty of households out there that are doing it very tough, not just on energy, but also on interest rates and even their grocery bill, which is not necessarily all just from natural disasters. This is also labour-made. They took away an ag visa, they took away the workforce to increase supply for your food as well. So you should see Anthony Albanese's face on that docket every time you open that up at the checkout as well. But this is the challenge in which their ideology isn't matching the practical reality. And you can't move towards this at the pace they are without making sure you actually spread your risk and make sure you have eggs in more than one energy egg basket. And that's what this government hasn't done. And ultimately someone will pay, but you're also going to pay for the renewables. While they're saying they're cheaper in generation, there's $20 billion worth of new transmission lines that need to go across this country, and that will flow back to your energy bill. Nearly 50% of your energy bill is poles and wires. Julia Gillard gold-plated. This mob are going to platinum-plate it. If you go to small-scale modular nuclear, run the ruler over that, you can plug it into where existing transmission lines are, and you can save yourself $20 billion straight off the bat. And that's why we took the pragmatic step as the Nationals to ask for a National Energy Summit to put this information in front of the Australian people, take them into our trust, and let them decide. And if it's not adoptable and adaptable, then well and good. But, we can't rely on renewables. And that's not David Littleproud saying that. That's the Australian energy market operator. They are saying as well that you need firming energy, and that can only come from coal, gas, and potentially SMR technology. So why don't we look at that and overlay not just SMR, but also carbon capture storage, and send the right investment signals to gas companies and energy companies that we will have a practical solution to this, one that fits the ideology of reducing emissions. If you take up carbon capture storage, you can do that with coal and gas, reduce emissions. So let's get back to first principle, reduce emissions, reliable, affordable energy, and look to new technology like SMR.
Yeah, well, on that point of dealing with the supply, one of the recurring excuses that we've heard from the government is that the energy crisis has been caused by the war in Ukraine. Now, take a look at this.
Going forward to ensure that the impact of Vladimir Putin's war does not flow through without a response from Australia's governments on energy prices.
We are very concerned about the impact on energy prices of the global energy crisis caused by the war in Ukraine.
We do want to try and take the sting out of these energy price rises if we can. They come courtesy of the war in Ukraine.
This crisis is caused by coal and gas prices. Anybody who says it's caused by renewables is lying.
Now, the reality is that electricity prices in the eastern states have been increasing long before the war in Ukraine. They even doubled before COVID lockdowns, and then we saw a sharp fall when whole industries were shut down, and then we saw the prices explode when the lockdowns ended. So this idea that this is all because of a war that just started 10 months ago, David, very quickly, it's just bollocks, isn't it?
It is, and it's about supply. And that's why not only does Dan Andrews need to start drilling some holes under all that gas that he's standing on, rather than saying that we should put a cap on price for Queensland gas, the rest of the country needs to get on with the job in increasing supply. It's as simple as that. We've been talking about increasing supply. And in fact, the first interview I did on Insiders after I became Nationals leader was exactly that, was about Chris Bowen and co not demonising gas companies, do what we did and work with them increasing supply. And credit where credit's due. Queensland finally opened up some more tenements about 3 or 4 years ago just for domestic supply. And lo and behold, gas companies took them up. So this is the thing, is that we have the levers. We've had the levers well before the war started in the Ukraine. We were working with gas companies to increase that. To credit where credit due, the Queensland government was doing. But Dan Andrews, the New South Wales government, and even the Northern Territory government need to get on with the job with Beetaloo, Narrabri, and further expansion in the Surat Basin. And Dan, just drill a hole, mate, and start to give your communities the gas they need. And you'll start to alleviate this issue. We're not like Europe. You've got to understand, we shouldn't have this problem. We have sovereignty of our resources here. We're not relying on a third party, another country, to rely on those resources to be sent through to provide the energy. We've got them. It needs the courage and conviction of federal and state governments to increase the supply.
We just don't want to use it. We just don't want to use it.
Exactly.
It's utterly ridiculous. Anyway, David Littleproud, thank you for joining me on Credlin tonight.